So now we're going to get into the 1965 NHL Amateur Draft, heading into the third season that I'll have covered so far, and this journey looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs and why they have not won a cup since 1967. So we're starting before that final Stanley Cup, the last Stanley Cup that they got. Now, before I get into this, it's actually up here in Canada, Thanksgiving. So I'd just like to wish everyone, if you're having that today, a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're having a good weekend, a good day, spending time with family, or eating turkey, or eating ham, or relaxing, doing whatever you want to do, and maybe going on YouTube and looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe that's it for you. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. So, we're going into the 1965 NHL Amateur Draft. And in today's standards, this is kind of weird because the draft actually happened before the end of the season. The draft this time was held a couple of months even earlier. It was April the 27th, 1965, once again at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal. But it was May the 1st when the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup in Game 7 against the Chicago Blackhawks at the Montreal Forum. So this happened before then. Now, looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is an interesting note. As Punch Imlach, the then general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, thought the draft pool was so weak that the Leafs weren't even going to participate in the draft. They weren't going to draft anybody. The drafting age had been changed once again to 18. So really, this group had already been combed over through previous drafts and sponsorship. So yes, of course, the draft pool is going to be even thinner, perhaps the most thin it has ever been through any of the drafts. And no, none of these players that were drafted uh, made any All-Star game, and none of them were there for then in the Hockey Hall of Fame either. Um, Yet there's still somebody in here you can draft that can help you. So yeah, get out of the way, Punch. I'm going to take over. I'm going to show you and bring for you who the Leafs could have drafted this draft. And there was actually only 3 rounds. I think after the first round, um, somebody stepped out, and then in the third round, I think it was only New York that drafted. So very thin pool. I think there was there 11 players that were picked, and only 2 of them made the NHL. So here we go. We're gonna get into it here. Because yeah, definitely, yeah, the draft pool is thin, but um, this is an excellent way of building your future and getting your hands on some excellent talent. If you're not so good, that's the whole point of the draft. Um, this draft was thin. They really needed to change things, like stop messing around with the ages here, guys. I think 18 is actually the right age to do this, like they do now. Maybe even older in some cases. I don't know, but younger, stay away from that. Just leave it at this age, and then going forward, you should have a better draft pool. But oh yes, they mess with the ages again later. I think as far as even 20 years old, they're being drafted. You have to wait to be drafted into the NHL. So there you have it. Uh, Now, I do know where the Leafs would have drafted if they participated, and that would have been at number 4. The teams just rotated at the time, so that's why um, they knew in advance who was going to be drafting. It wasn't based on the standings; they just rotate where you pick the following year. So they would have picked at number 4, and with this pick, the Toronto Maple Leafs should have drafted Pierre Bouchard from Longueuil, Quebec. I believe that's how you pronounce it. He did go on to play 595 games in the NHL as a defenseman. He wasn't a big time scorer. He did score 24 goals with 82 assists for 106 points. But he was definitely, I think, a guy in the last pairing of the Montreal Canadiens. That's who drafted him. And he played on some spectacular teams. He went on to win 5 Stanley Cups with the Montreal Canadiens, and they drafted him fifth overall in that first round. Other than Montreal, he did play for the Washington Capitals for a few seasons as well. His father was actually Hall of Fame defenseman Butch Bouchard, who also played for the Montreal Canadiens, and he won the Cup 4 times for the Habs back in the 1940s and the 1950s. This is the player, this is the pick of this draft. Um, and the Leafs could have had him. But he's the guy in this draft, and his career started in 1970-71 for the Montreal Canadiens. In the second round, with the number 10 pick, I would select center Michel Parizeau, born in Montreal. He ended up playing 58 games in the NHL, so not a whole lot. But he did score 3 goals with 14 assists for 17 points. His career started in 1971-72 for the St. Louis Blues, and he also played for the Philadelphia Flyers the following season. But when the WHA started up, Michel jumped over to that league, and he was in that league until it folded. So that's really where he played his career, was in the WHA. There he played for the Quebec Nordiques, in the Indianapolis Racers, and the Cincinnati Stingers. Some guy named Wayne Gretzky played on that same 1978-79 Racers team for 8 games that season. And at this point, he's a future Leaf, but from our standpoint, he was a former Leaf and a former coach of the Leafs. Floyd Smith was his coach in Cincinnati as well. Michelle went on to score 20 goals 3 times in the WHA, so that's he was showing what he could do in that league. His career high was 28 in 1974-75 for the Newards. So in the WHA, he wound up playing 509 games, scoring 142 goals with 252 assists, for 394 points. After he played, he got into coaching and was a head coach for the Chicoutimi Saguenayens in 1983-84, and then the Drummondville Voltigeurs from 1984 to 87 in the QMJHL, so the Quebec Junior Hockey League there, Major Junior, just like the OHL in Ontario. Now, first overall in this draft, it went to the New York Rangers. And okay, we've already gone through this. This is a thin draft. And so, yeah, they're setting up for this. And he didn't fill up to the first overall pick. But they did select Andre Villiers. He never did play a game in the NHL. But I did find two teammates he had on his junior B squad when he was in Montreal. They did have NHL careers. That was Andre Moose Dupont. He played probably most known for playing for the Philadelphia Flyers during their 2 Stanley Cups they won, and Rene Robert, who would later suit up for the Leafs at the end of his career. But originally, he was a Leaf prospect. I think he was signed to like a 5 game tryout back in 1968. I guess it worked because he was in the Leaf system, but they lost him to the Buffalo Sabres. That's who he was known playing for, and he put up some really good seasons for them. Very offensive numbers for the Buffalo Sabres, but he was picked up by them in the intra-league draft. So there you go. There you have it. And that's a short little video, but that was the draft from 1965 for the Leafs. So what I'm going to do now, instead of just rattling off their names, I'll come to a screen here and I'm going to show you all the draft picks the Leafs would have in their first 3 years. They're now getting to an age where they're 18 years old. The Leafs, on the other hand, they are that's a tough lineup to crack right there. Um, but these guys are becoming men now. They're being able to sign to these contracts, and we'll see who's in their minors at this point for the Leafs. Perhaps some of them may still be in junior, but see who they got, their hands on to play for them in the future. So that's it. If you like this video, hit like. Don't be afraid to subscribe as well. Uh, Definitely plan on putting more Leaf videos on here about those Leafs. And as well, if you want to comment on anything, go ahead and do so as well. And that's it. So go Leafs, go.